All right, folks, get ready to go over the exciting topic of the 7 principles of the Constitution. Now, I know this is a bit of a dry subject for some of you guys, but it is important. It does affect you in your modern life, and it all comes from all those old guys you just learned about at the Constitutional Convention and what they put together. And as one of our famous founding fathers said, he believed that this was the perfect way to run a government. So, let's look at what our main principles are of the Constitution. Our first one is popular sovereignty, and this is at the very beginning in the Constitution where we see the phrase, we the people. So, the idea of popular sovereignty is that the power begins with the people. Sovereignty means rule, popular having to do with people. So, the way we get our power is from the average citizen, and in the Constitution, they were saying that the average citizen can be trusted to make important decisions that affect their lives and the lives of other Americans. So, how do we exercise our power of popular sovereignty? Well, we vote. And our popular sovereignty is expanded over the course of our country's history, first by going to property owners, and then to African Americans, then to women. So, popular sovereignty has expanded in the last 225 years. And the big thing you're going to look for if you see anything having to do with popular sovereignty, they're going to be talking about voting, they're going to be talking about the people rule, or they're going to use the phrase we the people. Our next major principle is republicanism. This is one of the harder ones for people to remember just because, one, it's a big word, and then they often confuse it with the Republican Party, which do not confuse it for that. I want you to look at this part right here, republic, as in like the Roman Republic. So whenever you have a republic, citizens go and vote, and then they elect representatives to go and make the laws and run the government for them. If we were a true democracy, then all 330 million of us would be eligible to help run our country, but that would get a little crowded in Washington, D.C. So we go and we elect representatives to go and vouch for our needs at the national government, and we also do that at the state level. Next principle of the Constitution is the idea of federalism. So, in the beginning, when we had the Articles of Confederation, all the power was given to the states, and then the national government was very weak. We learned very quickly that that's not going to work out so well. So, we wanted to make sure we had a strong national government, but we also wanted to make sure that they didn't overpower the states or that the states would have more power than the national government. The founding fathers did see that the state governments and local governments need to take care of their own local needs because they'll know what the best interest is. So, what they came up with was the idea of federalism, where you have some powers that are only part of the national government, such as having a military, declaring war. It would be a little awkward if Virginia, say, could declare war on France. That wouldn't work out so well for everybody else. Other major things that need to be standard for the United States, such as postal system, weights and measures, things like that. The states actually have a lot of local power, so setting up their own local governments, all the stuff about your education and schools, that comes from the state. Regulating commerce, which is the buying and selling of goods. This has been a hot button topic in our news for the last couple of years, especially with the idea of gay marriage. Originally, because the laws that have to do with marriage come from the state, that's why there wasn't a federal or a national law made about gay marriage because it was referred back to the states. That didn't get overruled until we were looking at marriage from a civil rights point of view. Then it became a national issue. We also both have shared powers. Both the state and national government can collect taxes. They both have courts, regulate banks. They both can borrow money. You can punish criminals criminals can go to state prison or they can go to federal prison. So this is a whole little harmony going on right here where you have the states and the national government all working together. Next principle of the Constitution is going to be the idea of separation of powers. So in Articles of Confederation, you only had one branch of government. So all the power was in one area where it couldn't really be, it could get too powerful. So they decided to divide, if you're going to have a strong national government, let's divide that power into three branches. So you have your executive branch, which is your president, vice president. You have your legislative branch, which is your Congress. And then you have your judicial branch. So in each of these branches, you have different powers. The executive branch enforces the laws, legislative branch makes the laws, and the judicial branch interprets the laws. And so this idea was so that each branch would have unique responsibilities and powers to make sure that one group wouldn't get too much power over another part of the government. So to make sure that each of those three branches of government stay in balance and one doesn't try to get more powerful than another, then we have the principle of checks and balances. And this is to make sure that they can each limit their own powers. This is also another way to try to protect citizens' liberties. And it was kind of this idea that one branch of the government's always going to have two other branches looking over them. For example, the legislative branch, they can pass a law, they can make the laws, but let's say the executive branch of the president doesn't like the law, then he can veto. That's one way he checks the legislative branch. But let's say the legislative branch really wants this law to pass, well, then they can come back and override the president's veto with a two-thirds vote. So that's how they can check the president. The principle of limited government, this kind of goes back to the year 1215. You should have gone over this earlier in your course over the Magna Carta. That was where the lovely Prince John, like the guy from Robin Hood, he was forced to sign the Magna Carta and basically said that he was not above the law. Well, this idea was a pretty good idea. It comes all the way into our United States Constitution. In your world cultures class, you also talked about the idea of limited and unlimited governments and the positives and negatives from each one. And a limited government, meaning that no one is above the law, is another way to protect the rights of citizens. It's also needs to make sure that the government's power is limited. So an example I used to always give my students is, let's say the president's driving and he gets pulled over for speeding. Well, then he would get a speeding ticket just like anybody else, because again, everybody has to follow the laws, even the president. Our last but not least principle of the Constitution is the principle of individual rights. So this idea all came back from the Declaration of Independence when we said that we all have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You know, those unalienable rights, the rights that can't be taken away. So these came up in the Declaration of Independence, and then they continued on with this idea in the Bill of Rights, which was later added to the Constitution. And it was to protect the idea that we are born with these unalienable rights, and it's the purpose of the government to protect those rights. So the way that we made sure that this happened is we added the Bill of Rights to the Constitution. And that's actually going to be our next major topic in this unit, is going to be about the Bill of Rights. One last thing I want to point out. This isn't a principle of the Constitution, but it is an important part of the Constitution for you to know, and that is the elastic clause. This is a clause that is put in the Constitution. It's below, the Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by the Constitution and in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. So basically, Congress has the power to make laws which makes it necessary and proper for them to do their job. This is where you get a clause that gives Congress a lot of loopholes to make almost the majority of laws that are made today. They come through the elastic clause, because in the Constitution it says you only have the powers that are given to you in that Constitution, unless you're following the elastic clause where you make all laws that are necessary and proper. I just wanted to add this little tidbit in. It's a positive because we change over time. The Constitution's a living, breathing document, so we need to have something elastic or stretchy so that the Constitution can kind of stretch with the changing times. If it's too rigid, then the Constitution breaks, and we're back to where we were with the Articles of Confederation. So again, elastic clause, good one to remember. I hope this gave you an opportunity to better understand the 7 principles of the Constitution. Your next big thing you would want to do with this is to see how do these principles all apply to various real life situations.